infrastructure. We have Mr. Akash Kapoor, who's a senior fellow New America and GovLab, and also a visiting scholar from Princeton. He writes regularly on tech policy for the New Yorker, WSJ, as well as NYT, where he is a former columnist. We also have Mrs. Deepika Moglashetty from Ekstep, who is going to be our moderator for today. Unfortunately, two of our other speakers could not make it. And yes, Mr. PK is a professor from IIT Hyderabad, and so glad to have him here. If you all can just step forward to just take a quick picture, and then we can go ahead with the discussions. Thank you.
This is a nice, cozy group to have a conversation on safe AI. I'm sure we've been in many panels over the last 2 days, and it must be a little bit exhausting.
No, I came only today.
Excellent.
From Hyderabad.
We will only pick your brain. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, everyone. We're here because we've certainly reached a certain point in this conversation of safe AI, which is moving certainly beyond principles which everyone is agreed to and happy with, to what does it really mean to bring it alive in a real way. Moving from principles in some way to the conversation on what does access to safe AI mean, and also what does safe infrastructure mean, safety infrastructure mean. Fundamentally, good intentions don't scale. So as we build population scale AI, how should we think about safety? What should that infrastructure look like is the conversation we want to have today. We're very happy to have Akash and PK. Is that how we should refer to you?
Yeah, that's how people know me. So.
Do your students call you PK?
Sorry?
What do your students call you?
PK.
Yeah?
Even a first year student calls me PK.
All right then. Akash, let me start with you. You've studied how transformation technologies shape communities and social structures, right? When AI safety principles are developed in labs or in policy circles, and we've been in many of those rooms, what typically gets lost in translations? When these systems encounter real-world complexity, basically intent is great. When the rubber hits the road, what gets lost and what's difficult to implement and bring alive?
Thanks. Thank you all for being here today. I think that, as you say, when technology moves out of the lab or out of the creation phase into the world, it encounters society and the complexity of society. It encounters users and all the sort of complexity that users bring with it, all the kind of demographic and cultural complexity. So, this is not something that's really new to AI, right? When I was writing my PhD, there was a lot of talk about ICT 4D. I don't know how many of you remember that. It was information kiosks, and I still remember, doing my field work in villages around Pondicherry and in Tamil Nadu, and you had all these information kiosks that were supposed to democratize information. But then it turned out that because the villages were delineated by caste, so where it was located in the village had a huge bearing on who could actually access the information. So I think with AI, we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see that, on the one hand, there's a promise of this kind of all of human knowledge embodied in these models, but then there's all kinds of questions about access and how they're actually deployed in the world, which will be filtered through culture and society and all of that. And I think this is a really important dimension of safety. I mean, we've obviously moved past the notion of safety as just being existential risk. These sorts of like exclusion, inclusion factors are part of safety. The one other thing I would say is the other aspect of safety that I'm increasingly interested in, or just kind of access, is the temporal dimension, because we create technology, we release it into the world, into a particular configuration, but then the set of incentives and the configuration changes a lot over time. There's been a lot of work on this relating specifically to the internet and how the sort of, the internet was originally this kind of like open platform, and over time it became a series of walled gardens, and the experience for users really changed. So I think when we're talking about safety and measuring safety, we need to think of it not as a one-time kind of check, but as an ongoing process, rather than a kind of like, you don't just create technology, decide that it meets certain safety standards. There has to be sort of ongoing audits, certification, whatever it is, temporally.
I want a follow-on question actually. I find that the term safety is now being used for so many different things. It's becoming literally a safe word. Is the word nearly good enough to just describe the complexity of what you have just put on the table? Is safe becoming too so all-encompassing that we are not able to actually capture the nuance? Or is it still, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, when safety started, like when AI first sort of burst on the scene, safety was almost like defined as existential risk, and then there was a lot of pushback against that because we realized that before humanity gets wiped out by AI, there are going to be a lot of other problems that AI is going to... So I mean, I don't think that safety is actually the right word. I think we're probably grasping for another word. I mean, one way to look at it is responsible AI, and what does responsible AI encompass? So I think of like the various risks or disruptions or harms that could be caused by AI, and for now we're just using safety as a kind of catch-all term.
Catch-all term. PK, the question to you is, your work in cybersecurity, privacy, all of these social media safety in the Indian context. When we talk about AI safety at population scale in India, across languages, what are the unique challenges that global safety frameworks, we're coming back to that word, but global safety frameworks often miss?
Yeah. I think first, first let me get a sense of the audience, I think so how many of your students? Professionals working in companies? Anybody else? How many of you don't know what you're doing? Okay, very good. That's a very good state to be in. So I think when we discuss this whole safety frameworks, everything, right? I think India generally is looked up as, this multilingual problem, Telugu, Tamil, Marathi, and therefore it's hard to bring in the safety, hard to bring in the responsible AI, all that. Definitely that is one of the problems. That is one of the big questions if we have to actually get all these technologies at scale, technologies at population scale deployed, all that. But there's also one more, I guess, added to the language itself, which I feel. So how many of you speak 2 languages? English and something else? Okay. How many of you speak 3 languages? 4? Right? So some of 5. Right? So India also has that problem, right? I think generally when we talk about India, we end up talking about, this English one, probably next is Hindi, probably, and then we end up stopping. There is also this problem called code mixed, which is, I'm pretty sure all of you, if I ask you to open your WhatsApp and see from the morning the messages that you have sent, there'll be at least once or more than once you have switched between languages. 4 baje aa raha hu, evening ko dinner, we'll have dinner together, right? Evening paagla, traffic la irukken, I'll reach airport in 10 minutes, right? I switched between languages. So I actually don't know what the solution is. I actually think that for population scale safety or responsible AI solutions in India, this is going to be a next level problem. I think we know how to solve a little bit of Hindi, Marathi, Telugu separately now, but I really don't think so we understand anything about this code mix direction.
My follow-on question to you is that, so then when you talk about safety benchmarks, right, what does it even look like? Hyperlocal context, context-driven, who sets it? How do we do this? How should we think about this?
So I also don't know a lot of answers to it, but I know actually the efforts that are going on across the country, probably that can give us a sense of what are the solutions that we should do. For example, Xstep has deployed some solutions in farmers in different parts of the country. And when you look at these solutions, these are basically chatbots. The farmer is asking a question saying, what pesticide should I use? The weather is this. Next, what should I try? Oh, I have this 1 acre of land. I just finished groundnut. What should I do next? All these kind of questions, they can actually interact with this chatbot now. This is what Xstep's deployment is. But there, if you see, there is a lot of questions about safety itself. I mean, somebody can ask a question. For example, there was a demo that was shown like a couple of months back where somebody asked this chatbot saying, oh, I want to actually write a petition to the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. Can you write a draft of a petition? And the ChatGPT nicely wrote a petition and gave it, the chatbot wrote it and gave, and it was also very negatively pitched and all that. So is that right? Should the model be doing it? Should that chatbot should have done it, all that? So I think that's where India ecosystem deployed system at scale, if you were to attack the safety questions, this is the kind of problems that we'll end up having when it goes to, and particularly in India, I think we are deploying many of these technologies to people who are in the bottom of the pyramid also, right? Top of the pyramid, there are problems, probably we'll fix it, we'll figure out something. But the bottom pyramid, I think it's going to be extremely hard because of some of these interactions are not happening in typing text, it's happening in voice. We don't know how to understand voice again for all languages or multilingual and all that. Yeah, that's my take right now.
And that's actually a very good example to lead into the next question, Akash. And the question really is, safety at scale requires institutional accountability. And there are so many different types of institutions involved in the deployment of any solution. Now, government is one when it deploys it, but there are also private sector. All their interests are very varied. How do you then create frameworks that manage these different incentives, interests, pressures? So maybe the fundamental question is, whose responsibility is safety, and how do you create institutional structures of accountability? Can it be created at even? I don't know, I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a very tough question that seems like a kind of political economy question. I mean, I think one thing I would point out is that sometimes the incentives don't always line up in the wrong way, right? So I think we tend to focus on the negatives, but there are positives where, tech gets created in a kind of open way. And so, and in surprising ways, like I wouldn't have predicted that competition in AI and geopolitical competition in AI would push towards openness in models, right? Like, so open models have their own set of problems. I'm not saying that they're the solution to everything, but particularly after the DeepSeek moment, competition started pushing in the direction of openness, and a lot of US players had to jump on that. And so I think that's like a really interesting sort of alignment of incentives. I think another one that has gotten surprisingly little attention, but I think is like a really big deal, is the way Anthropic donated MCP to Linux. I don't know how many of you are familiar with MCP, since we're doing hand raising. Do people know what MCP is? Sort of, yeah. So, I mean, MCP it's like an open protocol basically for agentic AI that allows agents, it would create a common language for agents to talk across gates, across closed gardens, right? That would allow, it's like, think of it as kind of like almost like a TCP IP for what AI could be. And you could have easily imagined a situation where this would remain highly fragmented, and your agent from one company would not be able to access a service from another company. But it turns out that, like, I think companies basically realize that it's in their interest to build this ecosystem. So Anthropic created this MCP protocol, donates it to the Linux Foundation, effectively creating a new public good. So, and I'm just starting by saying that sometimes the incentives align in interesting ways. This is where public interest and private interest kind of align. So when they don't align, which often happens, I think that's where you need public policy and regulation. And, you know, typically we failed pretty miserably on the internet with this, to kind of like give more value to the public good over the private good and sort of profit maximization. But we now have the benefit of hindsight, and so maybe it's an idealized hope, but I would hope that this time around regulators and policymakers would be more aware of it. So yeah, I mean, it's not like a golden sort of answer, but I think this enters into the realm of regulation and policy.
And therein lies the question in terms of what are we doing about the thing, you talked about past lessons learned, right? If we didn't know what we were doing before, we know even less now, particularly because of how fast things are moving, right? So in this scenario, where should accountability, how do we think of accountability? There are the developers of certain things, there are the models. Should, in your mind, and if you have paid any thought to this, what kind of distributed accountability structures, which are very different from trying to wring the neck of one person who you can catch, the opposite of that, are there any ideas there that are coming to your mind?
So, first of all, I would say, do we actually know less? I mean, we know less in the sense that maybe we have these black boxes and tech is moving faster, but I think we know one thing that we should have learned from what's happened with the internet over the last 30 years, which is that if you just let tech and private interest in tech take its own way without policy and without regulation, you're probably not going to end up in a very good place. And I think that, you know, around 2015, 2016, when this started becoming apparent, we could say, well, we didn't know, right? Like, we didn't know it was going to end up here. But this time, if 15 or 20 years from now we're talking this way about AI, we won't have that excuse, right? So I think that we do know that this is where things could go. So in that sense, we actually know more. And so then the question is, like, where does the accountability lie? I mean, I would say that it lies in this is a question of democracy, right? These are not fundamentally different than questions about decision making in other areas of democratic life. Like, how do you get participatory technology? How do you input public will into technology? There is an argument that, well, you know, this stuff is so complicated. How can the public be part of it? How can you have public participation? It's true. I think there's something there. On the other hand, democracies regulate highly complex areas like pharma, nuclear safety. I mean, so I don't think that this is unprecedented. And I think the job of democratic institutions is to channel public debates about values, like, do we value individual freedom, or do we value equality, collective equality? These might be in conflict. How much do we care about efficiency and speed, which might be in conflict with justice or things like that? These are democratic questions that hopefully can be translated through the democratic system into how we regulate technology.
That's interesting. So what you're really saying is this is not a technology problem as much as going back to foundational principles of citizenship and democracy. And if you don't have those foundations that are strong, then you really are not going to be able to build or at least ask for safer systems or hold to account for safer systems. That's essentially what you're saying. PK, I saw you nod your head. Did you disagree?
No, I completely agree. I was going to give examples of privacy and things like that. I don't think so we understand how to do some of these things in, as he said, topics, if you go back, right? I don't know whether we know to you how to, who's accountable for things on the internet. We don't have an answer, 60-year-old question, and then you talk about privacy. Yeah, I think it's just the same.
Yeah. So
can I just say something? I mean, I think privacy is a good example because I mean, citizens might be willing to give up a certain amount of privacy in order to have certain benefits, right? Like this has been a common sort of debate around Aadhaar. And I mean, that decision, that is a public decision, that is a balancing of competing public interest goals, which democracy should be able to handle, basically.
Yeah.
So then the question, given particularly you're talking about harms and privacy and that question, in resource constrained settings pretty much like ours, where our experience has been regulatory capacity is limited.
Yeah.
So, and if you look at also the response to that currently in terms of how we're looking at AI as well, we're actually treading very carefully with guidelines and things that way, much more, and not jumping into even trying to legislate this, right? So in your mind, now that you know what you know and you've studied what you've studied, what could potentially be lightweight safety mechanisms for the kind of systems that we have? Because you do know what the capacity looks like. So do you have any ideas on what it might look like from a regulatory framework? If that's even the right word, I don't know.
I actually don't know also, but let's go ahead with the question about, so what would it look like, right, if we have to, I mean, accountability frameworks. I don't think so. We understand these topics very well in many other domains. Similarly, probably in the space of AI also. But I think, I mean, there have been, let's go back and look at some of the approaches that people have tried. For example, security, privacy, there was this framework called self-regulatory. Right? People tried, I think India also, Data Security Council of India. I just saw somebody from Data Security Council of India here. So organizations would sign up saying that this is what they would do, this is what they would not do, but there is no regulation. As you rightly said before, we are limited in our impact, influence in these frameworks, if you were to say. I think there have been some efforts in the US also starting to come or tried in this self-regulatory, but I don't think so. It is very, very effective. So what I'm trying to say is that there are methods that people have tried in other areas in the past. I don't see it yet influencing the AI space. Even if it influences, I don't know where it is going.
So in that scenario, what does meaningful safety and responsibility look like?
So in my head, I think companies, guardrails, around that, that's probably one approach. The other is, of course, user safety, right? So here is a simple task that I can do here. So how many of you have downloaded a single app in the last 1 month on your phone? Raise your hand if you have downloaded one app. Keep your hands up. So one app in the last 6 months. Essentially, I want all hands to go up. One app in the last 1 year. Okay, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. My questions are not done. 1 year, right? When you downloaded the app, there was this thing called as agree, right? How many of you read what is the text and then clicked the button agree? And how many of you did not read it? If you have read it, please keep your hands up. Did you write it? Usually that's the case. People who are keeping their hands up are the lawyers or somebody who actually write it only. They're the only ones probably. Right? Look at that. No? So same thing is happening with all the models or all the AI sort of say tools that we use. I'm sure you all signed up when you logged into ChatGPT. You gave something. You don't know what you gave. And so now what can you expect? Right? You gave something to Facebook when you signed in. So I think that's I see the world in the same way, like what I saw like 10 years before on social networks, where we were downloading the apps, installing them, and end users license agreement, we did not care about reading it. I mean, I think old saying, right? The problem is just, I'm reflecting on what he said before, nothing has changed. It's the derivative which has changed in the AI, which is the quickness, fastness, impact. That's the only thing that has changed last 60 years, at least the things I know of.
Can I I agree with that. And the only thing that has changed or that's trying to change besides the speed is that somewhere along the way tech convinced the world that it shouldn't be regulated, right? So like I was thinking as you're giving the example of the consent form, which is very important, imagine that 100 years ago, whatever, the pharma industry had convinced us the same thing. When you take a pill, you have to read a 30-page medical document and say whether you agree to take it or not. That's not how it is, right? We rely on regulators to not put pills out in the world that can destroy our lives and kill us. So somewhere along the way, tech convinced regulators that it shouldn't be regulated and offloaded the regulation onto consumers, right? So I think part of the challenge is to take that back and give some authority back to the state, whether it's through tech-specific regulation or existing regulatory frameworks is something we can talk about.
I have been thinking about this quite a bit, and there's something which occurs to me more and more. We've chosen the tool of terms and conditions, embedding as text in engagement. Basically, it's a contractual relationship. Why? Because tech has been built in a certain part of the world where contracts and liability are the preconceived frameworks of engagement. But is it time to demand that, since technology has evolved so much, that you should be in a better place to communicate better, explain better, to leverage the same technology that you're using, you're trying to make me a user of. So therefore, when we pin responsibility, the question for me is who's going to pin this question, right? I say, tell me in a way that I understand. Inform me in the structure that I understand. Meet me where I am, because you now seem to have tools to get there. Should that be the push?
So a lot of research, at least in the space of privacy, has been done in this case, right? Which I'm pretty sure we can use it for AI also, where they have converted. So I did the end users license agreement before. You can do the same thing for privacy policies. How many of you have gone to so there's been a lot of studies. So how many of you have gone to let's take unknown website in the last 1 month at least once? Okay, let's do the known websites only. How many of you do e-commerce on Flipkart, Amazon? Have you ever looked at the privacy policy? Keep your hands up if you have read even some parts of the privacy policy, right? So I think that we have the frameworks. For example, there has been a lot of research done to convert this whole privacy policy into you talked about pills. The sticker that's around your pill bottle, right? It just says calcium 30%, this 30%, blah, blah. Or you buy a juice bottle, it says sugar, fruits, blah, 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 this. You can convert privacy policies like that. You can convert the terms and conditions like that for these ChatGPTs or something like that. I think that's the direction we should go, but it also has a different problem, right? Now you're offloading some of the things to the users. Users have a different set of problems, right? I think we have to find a sweet spot in between users, tech, government, and if there's any more. Yeah, at least these are the stakeholders. We have to find a sweet spot. I don't think so we have done the sweet spot figuring out for many other topics. I don't see it happening in AI also right now. So then I think the efforts have to keep going on in different directions. So somebody has to do the user side, somebody has to keep pushing the AI side, somebody has to keep pushing the company side. You're asking so as though we have solved the other problems. No, for privacy, so for internet.
Absolutely agree.
So for so many other things.
I agree, completely agree.
So
the reason I said so was just to see if we can push ourselves a little bit further.
No. I think the effort should be in all the directions.
But what I'm taking away from what you just said, right, is that the convergence of all of this is even more urgent today because of AI. I'm not saying it wasn't urgent before. Maybe it wasn't felt this urgent before in the way because of speed, like Akash said. So then you need all different people at the table, the advocates for each of these, to be able to think like each other, the responsibility to think like each other in some ways. Akash,
so unfortunately, the current state of thinking, Nitarshan is not here. I thought he's one of the right. So Nitarshan, right? People like Nitarshan or Anthropic or Gemini, I don't know whether they also understand the problem. I don't know whether they have techniques and tools to solve the problem in a way that is amicable to all the stakeholders that we're talking about. They probably have I've heard about some solutions which can be favorable to one, not favorable to another, all that. But how do you sit together and come up with a way by which every stakeholder is at least partially happy with it?
Akash, then, as we are deploying systems at population scale, so then, and they're repeated deployments, right? It's not actually, and so fast, so quick. Obviously, the problem is people are not going to have to, they don't have the luxury to think again and again and get to the right conclusion. So what could be perhaps the sort of shared building blocks to move this in the right direction? I don't know, evaluation tools, audit protocols, standards, what are there tools somewhere? Because ultimately, every deployment is not going to be able to think in this level of depth again and again and get it right.
Right. And also, there's the danger of having overly specific safety standards because they don't translate across contexts and cultures, right? Something that might be considered acceptable or safe in one context would not be safe in another context. So, I think that, do I dare say, like, we want a DPI way of thinking about safety? What I mean by that is I think of safety as a process and a method, rather than a set of rules per se, and so we need to think about like what are those methods, what are the processes that we'd want. Like, so I mentioned earlier that I'm interested in the temporal dimension of safety, right? So I think you could say that is a process. You say safety is not a one-time thing. If a safety regime, and this can translate across cultures, is that you do regular safety checks, okay? So like you decide what that safety check means, so that's one thing. And then yes, there are templates or frameworks that you can develop for tools. Another one would be to say, when we discuss safety, what elements of the kind of like AI user flow do we want to be checking on? I think it's clear that like a lot of the safety evaluations today focus very much on the model layer, right? And I think it's clear that like the model, that I would probably say most of the problems are outside the model. They start at the sort of app layer, which is where all the data extraction is taking place, and they extend to the social context, right? And so the model is the one that gets a lot of attention because it's kind of also, interesting and funky because it's the hardest to solve, because it's a black box and we don't know what's going on in there. I'm not diminishing problems related to bias and stuff that go on within models, but I think an approach to safety that says, we are very interested in what goes on beyond the model is also a kind of template that you can extend across cultures and contexts.
So two quick things. One is, I think X-Step, there's been some discussions about responsible AI as a DPI also. Meaning I don't think so. It is a topic that we should not be thinking or it's far away. I think AI safety should be a DPI in some way. The other thing, it's a side note, is that I don't know about your pictures. Can you see my picture there, all of you? I have not owned a blazer in last 20 years. I sent a picture I did not even send a picture. I think they took some random picture from the internet and probably sent it to Nana Banana. Can you go back to that slide again? Can you show the flyer on the back? Yeah. They probably, I don't know about you, whether you sent a picture with a green shirt or you even ever have a picture like this. So look at that, no? When I saw the flyer, yesterday somebody posted on LinkedIn, I saw this flyer and I was like, whoever created the poster did not ask me for any consent. It was my picture, right? They sent it to Gemini or Nano Banana. Now, Nano Banana has a TP of mine. I did not consent into sending my picture there. So all of this, and when the organization which is setting up the AI safety responsible AI workshop is actually doing it.
You don't actually know it was them. Might have been somebody that did it on the internet that they downloaded, right?
I can get, if somebody proves me wrong, I'll be very happy. But why would they want to do it, right?
Another thing is nobody put a blazer on me, I noticed. Right, and I'm actually up here wearing a blazer. So.
Yeah.
So with that, PK, maybe you can answer this question. Given all the work you've done, what do you wish as a safety mechanism, as a tool, that existed before? so that we wouldn't get to this position. In a sense, like, what tools do you think, given your research and everything, what tools do you think, if you wish existed, would make deployment safer?
I think, so just for context, I teach a full semester course on campus this semester called Responsible and Safe AI Systems, 13 weeks, 14 weeks, 28, 40 hours lecture, full semester course. So I think one line that we keep discussing in the class, it's a computer science class, so BTech students, MTech and PhD, all that. I think if I know what the system does, and if I'm able to probe and understand what the system has done with whatever it is doing, I think that should be good.
When you say, if I know, as the end user?
As the end user.
As the end user.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So if I know.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep it high.
Yeah, that way. And it comes back to the foundational principles again of democracy,
Yeah.
right? Which is, you should be able to ask questions, get answers in a way that you understand them, and then you have the agency to decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
And therefore, the responsibility of explaining is on any system, whether government or otherwise, that's holding power, I suppose, in some ways, or is deploying the system. Our time is up, but before I conclude, Akash, is there a risk, one safety risk that we are underestimating?
I have something that I'm thinking about and working on, which is, this might sound somewhat complicated, but the inadvertent safety risks created by safety guardrails. Okay? So what I mean by that is that a lot of the models going out, there are a lot of guardrails and rules put around them to make them safe. Well, I think a concrete example would help here. With Gemini a few years ago, there was a determination to not let it spread political misinformation, okay, which you can think as a proactive step to secure safety. And this rule was implemented in such a way that if anybody went to Gemini and asked a question like, where is my local polling booth? Or what time is my polling booth open or closed? Gemini would say, I'm sorry, I can't answer this question, okay? And there are many cases like this where the safety guardrails are introducing themselves problems. And so I think like that's something we need to be, that is something that's under-acknowledged, that like overzealous safety guardrails can, especially when you translate across cultural contexts, can create their own problems.
No, that's useful to know. And so my takeaway from this conversation in conclusion is that I don't necessarily know that the finger-pointing approach or trying to pin responsibility approach actually works as well anymore, because what we want is a much more collaborative approach and listening to each other to find common ground in terms of what we can define as safety. And in the end, it comes down to the agency of the user, but the agency of the user, the responsibility of enabling that agency is also on the provider of the technology, right? To make it understandable, accessible, and meaningful. So in order for collaboration to happen, maybe less finger pointing and less necks to ring, but still, how do you do that and build accountability frameworks that are meaningful is the challenge ahead of us. Thank you so much for this conversation, and have a good rest of the evening.
Come, we'll do a picture.
Yeah?
Come, we do a picture. It's okay. And I'll post it on social media also. If you don't want us. Yeah. I was going to ask them all to come nearby, but why don't you all come nearby?
Come closer.